Up next on Way of the Renaissance Man, celebrating human achievement with Heartland Institute Research Director and space travel enthusiast, Edward Hudgins.
Welcome to the Way of the Renaissance Man podcast. This is a show about ideas, personal empowerment, and celebrating the rational life. Our goal is to help each other discover the tools needed to better focus our minds, integrate our thoughts with actions, and live the lives we really want. I'm your host, Jim Woods.
When you're a high school student fortunate enough to get an internship with NASA during the Apollo 11 mission, you get to see true human achievement up close and personal. That's one of many fascinating anecdotes you'll hear about in this episode as Jim speaks with fellow human achievement lover and fellow space nerd, Edward Hudgins. Like Jim, Ed is a passionate intellectual activist who promotes reason, freedom, individualism, and capitalism through his work at the Heartland Institute, one of the world's leading free market think tanks. Some of the diverse topics discussed in this episode include transhumanism, the development of a neural net, the latest anti-aging science, and the brilliance of science fiction writer Arthur C. Clarke. You'll also hear Ed's sharp critique of the American education system. Yet the primary focus of this episode is the advocacy for creating what Ed calls Human Achievement Day. That's a day designed to remind people of how brilliant the mind in action can be. And what better day to do that than on July 20th, the anniversary of the day humans first landed on the moon. And now, here's Jim's conversation with Edward Hudgins.
I'm here with Ed Hudgins. Is it Edward Hudgins or Ed Hudgins?
It's Edward Hudgins, but my friends, and you're one of my friends,
okay,
call me Ed.
Thank you. All right. So Ed is the president of the Heartland Institute?
No, I am the research director.
The research director, even more important. So you and I have a lot of things in common. We have a common philosophical interests, and we also have common interests as fellow space nerds, if you will. You know. And this is since the podcast listeners are only listening, you're wearing your badge from NASA from when you interned there during the Apollo 11 mission.
That is correct. I was a high school intern. I don't know how a little geek like me got to be a high school intern in 1989, and so I worked at a major space center, NASA Goddard Space Flight Center, during the Apollo 11 moon landing. So I have my badge here. 1969. Sorry, 1969. Nope. Anyway, 1969. And of course, we're coming up on the 50th anniversary. Now, by the way, I also have, and for your listeners and anyone who watching the videos, I also have the flight plan, Apollo 11 flight plan.
May I?
Yes, you can hold.
Okay, I'm holding in my hand a document. For my fellow space nerds out there. You're gonna have to just trust that I'm holding something beautiful. Yep. It's even got the font of the old IBM Selectrics.
Yep.
You know?
Anyway, and
so that's beautiful.
That was 1989, and of course, and by the way, a little things coming around, so to speak, is when I was at the Cato Institute. And this is around 2001, 2002, I did a conference on space, the free market frontier, and I published a book. And I got Buzz Aldrin, who was on the first moon landing, of course, to do a chapter for the book. So go to Cato, space, the free market frontier. So, sort of things really worked out, and synergy there that I got Buzz Aldrin to do a chapter.
So you've had this interest all your life, basically.
As a little kid, I had this interest.
How did you develop this interest? Was it from science fiction books? Was it just from TV?
It was two things. First of all, it was from the actual space program. I was a little kid when it was starting. John Glenn, all little first graders sitting around the TV watching that.
What was the Mercury? The Mercury astronauts.
Yeah, the Mercury program. Right. So I was a nerd back then, but I always loved science, and I always loved science fiction too. I read as a kid War of the Worlds by H.G. Wells. Later on, I moved up to Isaac Asimov and Arthur C. Clarke. I saw when I was a youngin', when 2001: A Space Odyssey came out, again, I was too young to drive, but I had to find some neighbors or whatever who could drive me to the Uptown Theater in Washington, D.C., which is where the movie premiered. And so I saw it like 3 times as a kid, on the big screen. That just blew me away.
And you had already, well, that actually was...
It was before Apollo.
It was before the...
1968.
Well, that was, 1968.
Yep.
That... I have similar taste in fiction as well. Mm-hmm. I love all of the Asimov series. Mm-hmm. I love. I think Arthur C. Clarke's, foundation. The foundations are probably
that's
probably
Asimov.
That's Asimov. But the Clarke stuff.
Yeah.
The kind of the colonization stuff that he did is very interesting. It's it's some of the best nonfiction fiction out there.
Yeah. And what's also interesting is that one of the big things today is transhumanism, the singularity. This is the notion that more and more we're going to be merging with machines. More and more we're going to be, for example, Elon Musk, has really...
Didn't he just come out saying something, we're going to merge the humans with AI?
This has been around for a while, but he's actually been doing the work and the research, for example, to try to get a neural net that will allow work to be done in the brain, put information into your brain, or for example, do things in your brain that will maybe get rid of Alzheimer's, stuff like that.
Enhance the connectivity inside your brain.
Exactly. Yeah. And the thing is, what's interesting is today, of course, transhumanism is kind of a growing interest, the notion of humans becoming transhuman, meaning that we're sort of merging with machines. We still keep something of our humanity, but, for example, with a neural net that Musk is developing, we can basically...
Are you familiar with the science involved in that?
Yes.
How he's doing it? What's the plan?
It's really understanding how information is coded in the brain, at a very fine level. By the way, another interesting thing is breakthroughs that have been done on aging. What we know is that the reason why we age is that every chromosome has these little thing called telomeres on the end. And it's like a little plastic thing on a shoelace. And every time the cell reproduces, they get a little shorter and shorter and shorter. And pretty soon there's no more telomeres. And it's like the shoelace unravels, the cell doesn't reproduce anymore, and we all shrivel up and we die. Well, we understand the process now, and last April in Paris, after years of research, researchers were able to sequence the enzyme telomeres, which is the enzyme that makes the telomeres grow or keeps them from shrinking. So we now have sequenced that enzyme, meaning we can start studying it and trying to figure out
how to keep it alive and preserve.
How to use that telomeres to keep the cells reproducing, meaning you stop aging. Oh, and on the other side, to starve certain cells from this stuff.
Negative cells, cancer cells.
Yeah, right.
Exactly.
So the point is that if you look at science fiction, Arthur C. Clarke was writing about these sort of things in The City and the Stars, for example, and you get some of this in 2001: A Space Odyssey, which called it a little bit from that. So it's fascinating that Clarke was sort of seeing some of these things. I wrote a review called 2001, the first transhumanist movie, so you can look it up online.
Yeah, I definitely will. It's funny because Arthur C. Clarke was also the first person to predict that cell phones would be ubiquitous.
Yeah.
And he did it, 40s, something like that?
Well, he was also the one in 45, I think it was November, December 45.
He has a patent in that.
He published, what he did, this is another thing, he published the concept for communication satellites.
Yes.
That came from Arthur C. Clarke.
Yes.
And that's another anniversary you should celebrate. Speaking of celebrating anniversaries, what I argue is that this country needs a Human Achievement Day. Now, there's a couple of candidates for that day. One would be in October when Thomas Edison perfected the light bulb. But another candidate for that day, the one I first thought would be July 20. Since July 20, 1969 was when humans first landed on the moon. Can you think of a more incredible human achievement? Right. Something that in the past would have been science fiction. In fact, it would have been beyond science fiction. Just unimaginable. And yet human beings did it. And so I would love to see a day where in school, for example, kids sit around and say, we're going to talk about achievement. We're going to talk about how the world in which we live came about. Right. Now, for example, this interview is being done in Las Vegas. And it is 110 degrees outside. Right. And I'm sitting here.
Air conditioning,
I'm
that's one of the greatest human achievements.
And it's really great. Now, how many people know the story of how air conditioning came about? There's a guy named Carrier, and he invented the air conditioner. How and why? Interesting story, by the way. In the early 1900s, when you printed something, a newspaper or whatever, and you wanted to print color, you had to run the paper through one time and put the yellow on, and another time and put the blue on, and then another time and put the red on, and mix them together, and that's how you got the green and the orange and all that kind of thing. But the problem is, when you're dealing with a big industrial piece of machinery, between the time you run the paper through the first, second, and third time, the metal on the machine can expand and contract depending on the temperature, and so it gets blurry. And so the publishers, the printers, said, well, we need some way to control temperature. And so Carrier actually came out with this, well, if we do this and this and this, we can keep the temperature at a certain, cool temperature. By the way, people had tried to do this earlier as well, but they never got it quite to work. And so Carrier did that, and it was for an industrial use. And then, of course, for example, in the 1930s, this was in the 1905 or something like that, in the 1930s during the Depression, movie theaters are trying to figure out how can we get people to come in our theaters. Why don't we do this? If we invest in air conditioning, we can advertise, come in, air conditioning. You know, it's 100 degrees in Chicago. You want to be cool, pay your money, sit around, watch a movie and get cool. And so there became a market for air conditioners for industrial uses or entertainment uses.
Recreational uses.
Exactly. Yeah. And and so that's how the market developed. And of course, after World War II, you started to get personal air conditioners for windows and this and that and the other. But here's the point. Just take that. And by the way, interestingly enough, for people who are concerned about global warming, I'm not, but for those who are, the biggest peaks of heat in this country were actually in the 1930s. That's when you had a lot of heat deaths, for example.
Dust bowl kind of heat.
And stuff like that, yeah. So it was really crucial to have something like that in the 30s. But, and by the way, I forget it was 20 or 30,000 French people died. I think it was 2005, 2000, something like that, 2004, because there was a heat wave in Paris, and very few of them had a $100 window unit would have saved literally tens of thousands
I remember
lives.
that. It was like, because a lot of the infrastructure in Paris is so old that they don't have air conditioner like of the sort we're enjoying right this second.
Yeah, but the point is, all you need to do is say, well, I'm going to buy a $110, $15, $150 window unit, and unfortunately, most of the people who died, or a good big proportion, were elderly people who were, a lot of French were out on vacation and so forth, and it was really a tragedy. But the point is, here's the thing: wouldn't it be good to have a day? You could do July 20th, a Human Achievement Day, where you're trying to raise the consciousness of and sensitize people, especially young people, my 8-year-old girls, like 2 8-year-old little girls, about what made our world, how good it is compared to the past, and where that came from, so that the values that produced this world are preserved, because that's what's under threat today. Even the very notion of achievement, as opposed to, I'm going to dedicate my life to, stealing and redistributing money in terms of my whims.
Making everything fair for everyone
fair
else.
Fair basically means, whatever my whim is, okay?
Yeah. Fair is whatever the political elites deem it to be at that moment.
Exactly, yeah. And, and the thing is, if you want to talk about what we need a revolution for, it's in education. The education system is truly failing this country. If you take a look at education spending, say over the last 25 years, whatever period you want, by adjusting for inflation, it's been going up. 150, 200%, you know, depending on which part of the education system you have. However, SAT scores, everything else flat. Where's the United States in terms of like math? You know, we're number 30-something, 20-something in science.
Exactly.
The country that put humans on the moon, that's where we are now, okay? You see that the education system doesn't prepare students for the real world, for jobs. Even during the recession, there were something like 5 million jobs that went begging because employers couldn't find the workers. Today, there's about 1.8 million more open jobs than there are people who are unemployed. So there should be no unemployment. People should be able to say, wow, there's that many more jobs. I could pick this one, or this one. But they're not trained by our schools.
Yeah, because there's plenty of jobs that require some high-tech skills that people just aren't getting. They're not either not getting, or they're just they're not embracing as important.
Exactly. Or, for example, only about 30% of students go to college, and in a lot of cases, the tech stuff is really good. Okay, but if you take a look at a lot of the other areas, it's junk. Basically, the federal government has helped drive up the price of education by offering loan guarantees. So basically, students say, oh, wow, that's free money. Well, of course, it's not free money, but, you know, they're young, they're stupid. You know, we were all young and stupid at one time. Some people are old and stupid. We didn't think about it. So they take these loans, they get thousands of dollars of loans built up. And again, it's not, if they're going to be a medical doctor, they're going to be able to get that back and pay it off without a problem. But
yeah, if you have a high remuneration career that you're doing it, then you're okay.
Yeah, but what happens is so many of them don't. They get a BS degree. They basically spend 4 years getting drunk and laid on somebody else's dime, and of course they get radicalized.
No consequences in that, right?
No, what can you say? Yeah, and then of course they get out and they get radicalized by the hardcore left in the universities that dominate it. They come out, they support Bernie Sanders or occasional Cortex or whatever her name is, and when we had that 25 years ago, Bill Clinton had to run as a New Democrat. And now the socialists are right out in the open. They don't
hide it any longer.
That's right.
It's not subterfuge
and
anymore.
The reason is because the values have changed because of this educational system. Wouldn't it be great if, for example, in Switzerland, 70% of students go through an apprenticeship program? And it's kind of like a tryout. It's learn and earn. First of all, concept of learn and earn. You actually earn something. You go in
while you learn,
yeah, and
that means you have to deliver value.
Precisely, you got to deliver value. So they're learning a different set of values, and it's a set of values, of course, that's needed for a free system. Exactly. And so in this country, instead of pushing everybody should go to college, everybody shouldn't go to college, frankly. In many cases, it is a waste of time, it's a waste of money. You should go get yourself a skill. And here's the other thing. Exponential technology is what we've just been talking about in healthcare and biohacking and all these wonderful things. What that means is that the job market is going to really be changing very quickly. What's going to become more important in the future is lifelong learning. And so you're going to find adults who are more and more looking to up their skills, so to speak, and not just, and the thing is, not go to a 4-year college, but say, where can I get just the skills, not the BS?
Because the skills will change. Yeah. Like, I mean, the skills you had now, 10 years from now, they're not going to be really as up there. I mean, there might be some similar things, but you need to keep up your skills.
Right. And so here's where, for example, you're going to get a lot of pushback when we critique the universities, that they're overpriced, that they're a waste of money, they employ nothing but a bunch of lefties and this kind of thing. But one of the things you can hold out as a carrot rather than a stick is, well, look, universities, why not, instead of employing all of these worthless, ne'er-do-well, tenured professors who basically teach the most incredible BS you can imagine, why not have a system where you provide value for dollar for those adults who need to up their skills? Why don't you be part of that market? A number of them are doing that, by the way. One of my favorite ones was, there was a journal article about a feminist view of glaciers. a feminist view. It's a big ice cube. It doesn't matter whether you're a man or a woman or a transgender, whatever. It's a big friggin' ice cube, okay?
There's been a lot of those kind of like, you know, like there's been those famous like, you know, like, I don't know, there was some like penis one or something like that, you know.
It's insane.
It was insane.
Yeah.
So.
But anyway, the point
well, I mean, based on what you've said now, to me, that one good way to kind of initiate people into like respecting human achievement is to have your Human Achievement Day, July 20th. I know you're working on that at Heartland.
Yeah.
So, any closing thoughts on that?
Well, just this. Whenever you think about education, you should always think about education, jobs, careers. Whenever anyone talks about the economy, you should never disconnect these. Today we think, well, there's education, it's over there, and then on this table we've got labor,
separate,
and on this table we have business regulations. No, they're all tied together. You have to think of them as tied together. And if you do that, then when people talk about we need to forgive student debts, we need more student loans, we need more money for universities, you say, wait a minute, for what purpose, for what end? And then you start getting into the conversation about we have to reform the education system, we need school choice for K through 12, we need the customer, the parent, who's paying the bill anyway.
More freedom, more free markets.
More freedom, yep. We need that kind of competition at K through 12. We need, by the way, child safety accounts, because more and more bullying is becoming a serious problem in schools, school shootings and so forth. Imagine if each parent could take that money and say, I'm going to go to a safe school. Then parent power. So we need to have the market there, and we need to have the market in higher education as well. And that's where we need these alternatives like lifelong education, like sort of Swiss apprenticeship models. And we need a Human Achievement Day to pass along the values that have made this country rich and great.
Spoken like a true Renaissance man, if you ask me. Thanks a lot. Thank you for being in the podcast.
I've enjoyed it.
Thank you.
Take care.